Carl Jung didn't warn us about monsters in the world. He warned us about the one inside. He called it the shadow, everything we hide, repress, and pretend we've outgrown. It's the rage we swallow, the desire we bury, the fear we deny. Most people think ignoring it makes them civilized. But Jung knew the truth. What you refuse to face doesn't disappear, it waits. And it doesn't wait politely, it leaks, it whispers. It takes the wheel when you're most afraid. Until one day, it stops whispering and starts deciding who you are. You think you're in control, that your choices are yours. But look closer. Why do you sabotage what you love? Why do you chase people who don't want you and run from those who do? Why do you react like a child in adult situations? That's not random. That's your shadow at work, the parts of you you're ashamed of, running your life from the basement. Jung taught that until you confront it, you will spend your life calling self-destruction bad luck. You'll lose things and call it fate, but it was never fate. It was you hiding from you. The shadow doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock. It doesn't ask permission. It acts through patterns, subtle, painful, repetitive. You meet the same person with a different face. You make the same mistake with a new excuse. You say, this time will be different, but it never is. That's because you're not evolving, you're orbiting. And what you call coincidence is actually the shadow looping your life until you pay attention. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's the trap most men live in. They build lives based on rejection, not desire. They pick partners based on unresolved wounds, not connection. They chase success not out of purpose, but out of shame. And when it all collapses, they say life is cruel. But the truth is, you didn't lose control, you never had it. You just ignored the part of you that always did. The shadow isn't evil. It's rejected. It's everything you were told not to be. Boys are told not to cry, so their pain becomes rage. Told not to be angry, so their anger becomes silence. Told not to be afraid, so their fear becomes control, and all of it gets buried. But nothing buried dies, it festers. It distorts. And eventually it leaks out not in meditation rooms, but in arguments, addictions, obsessions, and cold, sleepless nights where you can't explain why you feel like you're losing a war you don't remember starting. That's why so many men hide in work, in porn, in sarcasm, in I'm fine. Because facing the shadow means facing the mirror and realizing that the thing ruining your relationships, your peace, and your potential is you, not because you're broken, but because you've exiled the parts of yourself that were hurt, afraid, rejected, and unwanted. Jung didn't tell you to destroy the shadow. He told you to meet it. Because the longer you avoid it, the more it grows teeth. And soon what you repressed becomes what controls you, not from hatred, but from being ignored too long. The shadow shows up strongest in intimacy. You think you want love, but what you actually want a valida cau de fart de voca que nunca se sentiu suficiente. In tuo voca encontra algum e transforma essa pessoa numa espelho. E quando ela não reflete o que voca esperava, voca entra em pânico. Voca se fecha, implora, foge, ou explode. Isso não é amor. Isso é o shadow. Exigindo que outra pessoa carregue fardo, que os voca deveria ter enfrentado. E por isso que ela se afasta. E por isso que voca atre o mesmo tipo de mulher, fria, distante, sedutora e indiferente, não é azar. E repetical. Jung dizia que o que voca não traz a consciência, se manifesta como destino. Ela não está reitando voca. Ela está reitando sua falta de interesse. Porque ela sente, mesmo sem saber, que voca ainda é dividido. Ainda está implorando por amor como as partes que voca enaru. E ninguém pode amar o que está escondido. Nem ela, nem voca. That's why she pulls away. That's why you keep attracting the same kind of woman, cold, distant, seductive, and emotionally unavailable. It's not bad luck. It's repetition. Jung said, what you do not bring to consciousness appears in your life as fate. She's not rejecting you. She's rejecting your fragmentation. Because deep down, she senses what you've buried, that you're still divided, still begging to be loved with pieces of yourself you've never dared to face. And no one can love what's hidden, not her, not even you. There comes a moment when the pain of repeating becomes greater than the fear of confronting. When the silence inside of you gets louder than the world around you. That's when something cracks, not out of weakness, but out of exhaustion. You stop blaming your ex. You stop blaming your parents. You stop blaming the world. And you look into the dark part of you that's been waiting for your attention all along. The one that never left. The one that holds your rage, your sadness, your shame, and your power. That moment is not glamorous. It won't be a perfect sunrise or a breakthrough meditation. It'll probably be a breakdown. Alone, quiet, ugly, but it's real. And that's where the man is born, not in the performance of strength, but in the acceptance of everything that's been buried. Jung believed that integration is salvation. The shadow isn't your enemy, it's your doorway. And when you finally walk through it, you don't become less human. You become whole. Sequaizer, sigo como paragrafos xii e char. Ondo homem comica a construir sua forca real. Não acu impressiona, mas acu sustenta. Posso mandar? True strength doesn't come from what you show others. It comes from what you stop hiding from yourself. Most men build an identity to impress the world, but it's hollow. It's polished on the outside and starving on the inside. That's why it collapses under pressure. That's why you can be successful and still feel like a fraud. Because you're not grounded, you're floating in performance. And performance always cracks under truth. The man who faces his shadow becomes immovable. Not because he's perfect, but because he's real. He no longer reacts from fear or pleases from shame. He doesn't chase validation. He doesn't collapse under tension. Because he knows what lives inside of him and he's not afraid of it anymore. That kind of man doesn't need to prove his value. He embodies it. And that's the moment you stop being controlled by the parts of you couldn't face. Because now they're no longer in the dark. They walk beside you. When a man integrates his shadow, the world responds differently. Not because he's louder. Not because he demands respect. But because people can feel that he's no longer at war with himself. There's a silence around him that unsettles others because they're used to manipulation, not clarity. He doesn't flinch when tested. He doesn't explain when misunderstood. He just stands, fully, and that stillness speaks louder than any performance ever could. Women notice it, friends feel it, enemies hesitate around it. Because there's nothing more dangerous, nothing more magnetic than a man who no longer fears what lives inside of him. He doesn't need to control others, he controls himself. He doesn't chase power, he carries it. And those who used to try and play him now play themselves because they realize he's no longer reacting, he's watching, choosing, and that's when the game ends. The shadow, once faced, becomes a weapon. Not a weapon of destruction, but of clarity. Because the man who knows his rage can choose when to burn and when to walk away. The man who's seen his jealousy can choose loyalty without illusion. The man who's owned his need for control no longer needs to dominate others, he commands himself. Jung believed the parts of you that scare you the most are often the ones with the most energy. Once you stop fighting them, that energy becomes yours again. You stop fearing your darkness and you start using it, not to harm, but to protect. To hold boundaries, to speak truth, to walk away without shaking. The same shadow that once sabotaged your life now guards it. Because you finally listened to it, you stopped running. You gave it a voice. And now it doesn't have to hijack your decisions from behind the curtain. It walks beside you as a quiet advisor, not loud. Not flashy, but loyal and unshakable. You've seen both of them. The man who walks into a room with quiet depth, and the one who fills the silence with noise. One is grounded. The other is floating. One sees through people. The other is desperate to be seen. One has met his fear, made peace with it, and now moves with precision. The other is still outrunning memories he won't name. One lives with truth. The other performs for survival. Same age. Same goals. Different foundations. The man who avoids his shadow might look successful. He might even seem happy. But there's always a tremor, something that gives him away. Overreactions, sudden insecurity, the need to control everything around him. Because when you don't control what's inside of you, you start trying to control everyone else. Jung's warning wasn't for the weak, it was for the unaware. You can live your entire life thinking you're choosing your path, while it's actually your shadow making every decision behind the scenes. Quiet, unnoticed, until it costs you everything. The freedom you're chasing doesn't come from controlling everything around you. It comes from no longer being controlled by what's inside you. You don't need more discipline. You need reconciliation. You don't need to be stronger. You need to stop wasting strength resisting the parts of you that were never the enemy. The pain you keep suppressing is trying to teach you. The anger you keep hiding is trying to protect you, and the fear you avoid is trying to guide you. Jung didn't offer a quick fix. He offered integration. He didn't tell men to destroy their shadow, he told them to respect it, to sit with it, to listen. Because when you do, you stop living in reaction. You stop living in repetition and you start living in truth. Not polished, not perfect, but grounded, clear, whole. That's the kind of man who walks into a room and doesn't chase attention because his presence already carries weight. Not because he's light, but because he's made peace with his dark. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is the core. Real growth doesn't happen when you run toward the light. It happens when you stop running from the dark. When you sit with the parts of you that feel unlovable, unacceptable, unsafe, and see them without judgment. That's when the war ends. Not because the pain is gone, but because the silence finally speaks. And what it says is this: I was never here to hurt you. I was here to be heard. That's the moment your life starts shifting. People feel it. You don't beg anymore. You don't pretend. You don't explode or collapse. Because you're not performing, you're aligned. You're no longer leaking energy trying to hide the truth. You're living from it. And the world starts to respect you differently, not because you finally figured it out, but because you finally stopped hiding. And now your presence isn't clean, it's complete. So look at your life, really look. Not the goals, not the image. Look at the patterns. The places you collapse. The triggers you avoid. The emotions you stuffed out. That's your shadow speaking. That's the part of you asking, will you keep pretending I don't exist? Jung didn't say integration was easy. He said it was necessary. Because as long as your shadow remains in the dark, you will keep sabotaging everything that matters and calling it fate. But if you're ready to change that, don't run, don't hide. Turn around, face it. You don't need to destroy your shadow. You need to shake its hand. You need to learn its language. And when you do, you'll stop being ruled by it and start walking with it. Because the truth is brutal but freeing. The shadow you refuse to face has been controlling your life. But it doesn't have to anymore. And the man who integrates it becomes untouchable.